Smokeout vinyl, Chicago's very own. You might be able to find them on Spotify and other things. They're not technically together anymore, but either way, they're fantastic. From Chicago. That came out about 2001. So there you go. My name is Tom Barnas. This is the Stories from the 78 podcast. I appreciate you stopping by. It's an accoutrement, if you will, to the Stories from the 78 website. And you can find that at storiesfromthe78.com. And I try to do things where I try to give you a little backdoor, if you will, of some of these segments that I do here in Chicago. One of them that is kind of a fun neighborhood, West Loop. If you've never been, it's been up and coming for a long time. It is there. But the West Loop in Chicago is, I would say, it's probably the closest thing to maybe the meatpacking district in New York City and how it kind of morphs into Greenwich Village. You know, it doesn't have the Greenwich Village old school dive bar things that make it cool because this is relatively new. But meatpacking right along the High Line there, whatever that thing's called in New York City, that's what the West Loop is. And Mark Nolan and Three Dots and a Dash, both Chicago entities. Three Dots and a Dash is a lettuce restaurant over there in River North. And Mark Nolan is a place where you can get the finest shoes around. My friend Sebastian opened the place up, and he named it after one of his favorite people, and his son, mentor of his was Mark, and Nolan is his son. Anyhow, and Three Dots and a Dash, been around Chicago for a long time. It's one of the best restaurants for cocktails in the entire world. So I went there and did a story about the collab that they have, which, didn't, to be honest with you, when I saw the story, I was like, meh, but I'm like, hey, you know what? Why not? Because I don't wear the type of shoes that, at least not yet, that is in the store. But I figured, what the hell? What I got something to learn. So I went there, and Sebastian, cool dude, man, the guy who owns Mark Nolan right there in the West Loop. He is a Polish immigrant, came to the States from Poland, from learning all of what he knows about fashion from his aunt and his mother. And he has got a fun story about how he became to be and appreciate fashion. And now he lives on the South Side, right where I grew up in Paisley Park. I grew up in Palos Hills. So fun story right there, right there on the page. If you want to check it out, I had a fascinating conversation with a man named Wesley. And Wesley is Haiti's prime musical minister ambassador. He's here in Chicago coming up mid-July, playing by Belmont Cragen. And he won a scholarship to go to Montreal, and that kind of changed his life. In Haiti, he really wanted to learn how to play music, and he begged his father to teach him how to play. And his father would, right there on the beach, teach him how to play. And he won this scholarship to go to Montreal to learn other things. And now he's on a mission to spread the word and love of Haiti, because he knows what it looks like to the rest of the world. And he wants the rest of the world to know that Haiti is not this place that perhaps the media and other places have portrayed over the years, that Haiti is this place of love and culture and great people. And I kind of got the vibe that he felt like Haiti was a little misunderstood. And I think that's pretty fair. If people only know what they see on the news about hurricanes wiping it out, and, you have all this corruption going on there, there's still, I'm sure, just like in any city in the United States, there's corruption and there's all sorts of things that make it not great. But, there are great parts of a city, including Chicago. So I do this website and this blog here and this podcast because, people crap all over Chicago all the time. And I'm trying to do my part to make sure that it's not all crap that people hear. Excuse me. So, sorry, I went for a bike ride. It's 98 degrees today. That's why the fan's spinning in the background there. And I'm sweating in my house in the air conditioning. Anyhow, so this story of Wesley, he goes into great detail about why it's so important to him to travel to the States to share this music. He also shares what voodoo music is. And it's not what you think it is at all. It's kind of what like the people in America deem what voodoo is. So they only use that to get people to understand, like, oh, voodoo music. Oh, it's from Haiti, blah, blah, blah. He gets into that and how that's a big misconception. And I think that's a wonderful avenue for him to go down. He was a lovely human being. Like after I was done interviewing him, I just kind of wanted to give the guy a hug. I'm not going to lie. Wonderful time talking to him, and it's my first time talking to anybody from Montreal for the website, so pretty cool, and a lot of fun. The big event in Chicago this past weekend was Windy City Smokeout, and if you've never been and you're a country fan, you need to go to that. It's better than Country Thunder or any of that other stuff because it's in Chicago. First of all, it's at the United Center campus. The backdrop is the skyline of the city. You have the best barbecue places, some of the best barbecue places in the world. I say that because there's not, a huge amount. There's a good amount, and all of them are great. And you have a lot of representation of the Chicago steak barbecue joints. And you have this wonderful place called Wright's out in Arkansas. And I had something from Tennessee. You just go around, you had burnt ends and brisket and elotes, and it's wonderful. And it's a cool vibe because it doesn't get overly ridiculously crowded because they kind of cap it at 20,000 a day. And it's 4 days right there on Chicago's west side along the UC, right on Madison. And it's one of those things that if you've never been to, you got to check out if you like country or if you like eye candy. And I say that for both, or for all, I should say, because there's a lot of skin, and there's for both or all, however you want to, yeah. There's enough for everybody. Let's just say that. And the music's great. And I'm not even a country person, but I love going to Windy City Smokeout just because it's fun, man. The drinks are great. It's usually 100 degrees outside, but they got misters and the whole thing. They had the headliner of Carrie Underwood this past Sunday. I don't know, just a good time. And it's 4 days. So you can find some barbecue, listen to some country music. And even if you don't love country music, they play like pop music in between the bands that go up on stage, and it becomes like this party atmosphere. So it's just a good time. Hang out, man. Have a good time. And speaking of parties, perhaps the most well-known ballpark in all of sports with the biggest parties back in the day, what might have been Comiskey Park. Not just because of disco demolition, because that was a thing, but Comiskey Park was this magical place that was on Chicago's South Side, is where the White Sox played all the way from, I believe, 1920 to 1980 or something like that, or 1910 to 1980. And it was a magical place. And I was there once as a kid, and I don't remember much about it, but I remember vividly people telling me stories about it, seeing lots of video out there of old Comiskey, the exploding scoreboard, and the shower that was in the outfield, the bands that were playing, the music on the outside, the solicitors, the hot dog guys, everything. It was charming beyond Chicago charm. It just was. And I am a diehard Cubs fan. But I got to say, maybe now that it's been gone for 30 years or so, you look through rose-colored glasses of a place that you wish was still around. And certainly I think every White Sox fan that I know wishes that ballpark was still around. So I talked to this gentleman who wrote a book called Last Comiskey. And it's a fascinating story about a guy who really wanted to get the essence of what it was like to be at that ballpark. The author's name is Ken Smoller. And he was in college the year after Comiskey closed, and he was working at the new Comiskey as like a hot dog vendor guy. So he got to like sneak over to the ballpark as they were tearing it down, because this is like 1991. So, in Bridgeport, nobody cared. You would steal bricks out of the thing or what have you. And he snuck in, took a lot of photos, and he compiled the photos into this book called Last Comiskey. So we had I think the actual post is probably I don't know, 20 minutes. We probably talked for an hour just about other things, about the Bears and their decision of what they're trying to do, the Cubs even, and what they've done over at Wrigley. But man, oh man, the one thing we came to as far as a conclusion is that, man, if they just figured out a way to keep that place, it'd probably be the best ballpark in the world, for at least for baseball. because if they would have rebuilt it the way they did Fenway, I think it would probably be that. And I think it'd be hard pressed for many people to argue that point. And the thing that he talked about, and I find this interesting because I've heard this from a lot of people throughout the years of just listening to stories of people of old ballparks, specifically the Chicago Stadium that was right across the street from the United Center on Madison, was how loud it was. And that is what I hear about Comiskey. Louder than Fenway, louder than old Tiger Stadium. Had that Tiger Stadium vibe with the enclosed ballpark, but the upper deck was just like sandwiched right on top of the lower deck. And it just had this booming sound. And they even said, like, with a crowd of like 20,000, it was still loud. And when it was sold out, it was deafening. And that was definitely a home field advantage. And don't get me wrong, the place was a dump when it was closed. And everybody that was there said, yeah, the facility, it needed to be either updated or torn down. And of course, they decided to tear it down just like the Chicago Stadium, which I wish they would have kept that up and used it for something else. Because the parking lot that it sits on isn't that big. That's where the Windy City Smokeout is now. But it gives you an idea how small the Chicago Stadium was. They could have kept it and turned it into offices or something. But yeah, kind of goes with the whole, the way that the White Sox run their business. I know it wasn't all their fault, but either way, Comiskey Park was their fault for tearing it down. And then they built that monstrosity that's across the street because they wanted the same stupid address. It's an insult to the original place, but I digress. The book, though, is filled with photos and accounts of what that place was like and what it meant to people outside of disco demolition, which, yes, was great. But there was a lot of great stories. Did you know that it held a championship, a world championship team and celebration there? And it wasn't the White Sox. A lot of people don't remember or know that the now Arizona Cardinals played in Chicago. And that is the stadium they played the longest at, was Comiskey Park. So Chicago had the Bears and the Cardinals, the White Sox and the Cubs. And that was their championship, I think, in the 60s. I think they moved away in the 80s. And yeah, a great story. And I had a lot of fun talking to Ken about this book, just because I just love talking about old baseball things, and I just relish the chance to do it. So speaking of having great opportunities, not many people have had the opportunity to like go to like a legit rock star's house, right? And it's just for various reasons. Obviously, most of them being that you're not one of the rock stars, right? So Paisley Park, though, is open to tours. And late last fall, I went up that way and had a chance to tour Paisley Park. And you hear all the stories of what happened in Paisley Park, including the one with, I think it was Eddie Murphy or Eddie Murphy's brother and Eddie Murphy, and the basketball and how Prince schooled them. And they were like in that little kitchen area, and we saw the basketball court outside. But then you see the studio where Purple Rain was recorded, and many others like Fine Young Cannibals recorded in there. I believe Madonna recorded in there. There was many other artists that recorded at Paisley Park that I didn't know. A lot of them Prince was the producer of. I mean, Prince was the man, and he was a Minnesota kid, grew up in like the surrounding burbs and hung out downtown as he was getting his start. And I don't know, it's a cool thing to see, because inside Paisley Park, you get to like go inside and you see like, oh, that's where Prince like would hang out and make, bundt cakes for his friends right there in the kitchen. He would have a viewing room. And then the studios, you had these little rooms that were viewing rooms or parts of studios that we'd have people hang out in, that you can go in there. And now there's memorabilia. And there's even a club at Paisley Park. I didn't know that. A club at Paisley Park where it's set up like a club that he like curated. And there are exhibits in there now of different outfits that he's worn. And it's just, I don't know, it's a cool time. You get to get inside the eyes of Prince. And as you walk through Paisley Park, there are guitars all over the place. Certain guitars that have little what do you call those little things on the side there? Descriptions. There we go. Of the event, one of them being the Super Bowl. And I mean, I would argue that probably the Prince's Super Bowl halftime performance, probably the best one so far in the history of the Super Bowl. Maybe right there with like Bruce Springsteen and the mashup of like Eminem and Dr. Dre. Like, I mean, it's pretty spectacular. But the Paisley Park tour, highly recommend it. You walk into the Studio A at Paisley Park, and if you're a person that gets the feels, if you go to a place, I promise you will get the feels when you walk into this place. It's almost like pushing on your chest, that pressure when you walk in, because you just feel that energy and you feel it. And I wasn't the only one that felt it. A friend of mine named Adam, he was there, and we both kind of had tears in our eyes. And it was not because anything other than you just felt all that energy in that room. And it makes you sad that Prince is gone, and a lot of our heroes have since passed, just because time does march on. But to be in that space, to be in that room of greatness, was absolutely fantastic. And I would recommend Minnesota, great town to go to and visit. Food scene's pretty good. You could walk around most of the downtown like in a day and do your thing, go down like their Music Row that they have, like the First Avenue nightclub, among other things, Target Field, and you just have yourself a good time. So I did that. That's up on the page there. You get to see the little video that I did. And EatsCon is the last thing I want to talk about. So EatsCon is interesting. It's interesting because it's a convention. I don't know. It's like a food fest, but without, you picture like a very small version of like Lollapalooza, like small version, because it's not a huge footprint at all. It's at the Salt Shed in Chicago, which is a great music venue, but it's a music venue. So you're not talking about like acres like you can in Grant Park, except without bands being the headliners, they're food, and they're food vendors from all over the country that come here, and you get to like hang out and try some of these foods. And at this event specifically, they have these collabs with places that normally wouldn't do something, right? Like they had a Shake Shack thing with Ziegemans or something like that. The deli up in Ann Arbor that was featured in 5-Year Engagement, just wasn't called that, but famous deli, if you will, and their mashup. And they have other mashups, and they have places from LA and New York and Chicago, of course. And specifically at EatsCon this year, they had Common and Chance the Rapper coming in to talk. And that's the part that's like the what part of it, because it's just different. It's different. And you get to go inside the Salt Shed indoor part, and you get to listen to Chance and Common talk about food and restaurants and the culinary scene in Chicago, why it's so important to them, and why it's so important to the city. And people get to ask questions, and you get, like, if you're a giant fan of either one of Common or Chance the Rapper, this might be the closest you will ever get to hanging out with them and asking them questions, because they're right there. It's an intimate space. This isn't the United Center. This is a smaller venue, but it's one of the coolest venues to do anything at, including this. And they have, they have the up top, they have different viewpoints of the balcony where you can kind of look down and hang out and see the whole thing. And yeah, it was just a cool thing to experience. And that was 2 days out in Goose Island. But EatsCon 2024, a culinary event. So there's lots of things that happen in the city, and I try to think of things that I would like to remember and share with folks, and those are the ones that I wanted to share this week. I'm also a producer for CBS here in Chicago. Don't mind me, I'm just doing my thing here to see if I can access something while I'm doing this recording and not going to edit, because I hate editing podcasts. And there we go. Okay, so it's working. Let me see here. So I'm going to go and look in our calendar of what we did last week. It was a weird time last week because it was a week of stop and starts, because there's a lot of changes going on at work, and we got a new studio, and it's really fancy. So you should check out cbschicago.com and see the fancy new studio that we have. And we also kind of hung out and we did things in the city, and I wanted to share a couple of them. Oh, we went to L7, which is this new hotel in Chicago. It's owned by a South Korean company. It's their first time in the American market. They opened up in Chicago, and Perilla Steakhouse, which is an offshoot of Perilla out in River West. The steakhouse is phenomenal. If you want Korean American steakhouse, Perilla at the L7. It's right at Wabash and Wacker, downtown Chicago. Wonderful place. Another place that we did was the Go Green Plaza. And that is in Inglewood. And that's typically a neighborhood that we don't talk about very much outside of things that are not great. Because Inglewood is, it's one of those neighborhoods that's a little bit underserved and has struggled for years to get investment, the proper investment, and the whole thing. So, well, a company, or a group, I should say, a nonprofit, has opened up the Go Green Community Fresh Market on the Go Green Plaza. I want to make sure I say that right. Probably didn't, but either way, it's right there on 63rd Street, which is like kind of the heart of Inglewood. And if you're familiar with Chicago, 63rd Street is where Midway Airport is. You can get on 63rd Street from Midway, and you can drive it all the way to 63rd Street Beach. And that is, right just north of Rainbow Beach. Beautiful area back in the day. It was like south. It was like Lincoln Park South. It really was. Like 63rd and Halsted was where all the shopping happened. My dad specifically talks about how his mom, my grandma, would take him there to go shopping, and he'd go get something for like 5 cents, the whole thing. It doesn't look like that now, but you can see remnants of it. And a fun fact for you, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. A fun fact out in Inglewood is, if you've read Devil in the White City, the H.H. Holmes had his murder castle, and it was at 63rd and Halsted. And to this day, it's still an empty lot next to like a bank. It's just this big empty lot right there on the street. And it's kind of eerie and cool. And I'm going on a limb, but I feel like Inglewood will be a city that flips in the next 20 years, because there's so much there. There's so many great people trying to do great things. And they have 2 beautiful, gigantic parks right in the middle of that neighborhood. You have Ogden Park and you have Sherman Park, like Tink. One of them's got a flipping moat around a giant park with these beautiful bridges that go into the actual park itself, where it's got softball fields, baseball, soccer fields. I've never seen anything like it. I've lived in this city most of my life. It's certainly most of my adult life. And I just got the feels. That's where I got the feels. I instantly thought of my grandparents, because I'm pretty sure that that's probably the park they used to go to when they were young and they were on dates or meeting up with friends, because that was kind of right in that area. McKinley Park, all of that right there. Inglewood, I don't know. Anyhow, I wanted to share that Go Green Plaza is doing great things, and it's a refuge for a lot of people in the area to get fresh food and decent prices on all of the things that you would want to buy. And those are some of the things that I really, really was really happy to be a part of last week. So I'll be shooting you something next week. We did one of the top 10 pizza places in the world as a story from the 78, and I'll talk about that in next week's podcast. For now, though, please subscribe if you would. That'd be wonderful. Might make a couple cents out of this thing. And if you got something, shoot me an email, Tom Barnas tombarnaschicago@gmail.com, or go to the website, real easy, storiesfromthe78.com. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.